A newborn's cry echoed through Prime Hospital. Dubai, May 15th, 2023. 11:47 p.m. And the moment Dr. Patricia Lim unwrapped that baby, she knew this woman was going to die. The infant's skin was 3 shades lighter than his mother's. Reddish-brown hair, features that didn't match. Features that screamed the truth to anyone who looked. Outside in the waiting room, Sheikh Tariq bin Khalifa Al Mansour waited to meet the son he thought was his. But everyone close to him knew he was functionally infertile. This baby was impossible, which meant this baby belonged to someone else. 29-year-old Reina Valdez looked at her son and whispered 4 words that would haunt the delivery room. "He's going to kill me." Dr. Lim had delivered 8,000 babies in the Gulf. She'd heard this before. Twice the women were right. So she did the only thing she could. She lied. Baby needs NICU, respiratory distress. The baby was perfect. But the lie bought time. 72 hours, that's all. Reina had to escape Dubai, or become another woman who went home and was never seen again. Welcome to True Crime Story Files. Real people, real crimes, real consequences, because every story matters. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, and step inside the world where truth meets tragedy. July 2021, 20 months before. To understand why Reina Valdez said yes to a man she didn't love, you need to understand what it's like to scrub someone else's marble floors at 2 in the morning while your daughter sleeps 3,000 miles away. Reina had been working as a live-in nanny in Dubai Marina for 18 months. The job paid 2,500 dirhams a month, about $680. She sent home 30,000 pesos every month without fail. She lived in what her employers called the helps quarters, a converted storage closet next to the laundry room that smelled like Chanel No. 5 mixed with industrial bleach. That particular combination of luxury and servitude became the scent of her entire existence. Her room had no window, just a thin mattress, a phone charger, and a small laminated photo of her daughter Isabel taped inside her phone case, 7 years old, gap-toothed smile. The reason Reina woke up every morning in that airless room and didn't scream. She wasn't supposed to be at the charity gala that night in July. Her employer, Mrs. Kassem, needed someone to watch the children while she attended the fundraiser at the Atlantis Hotel. But at the last minute, Mrs. Kassem's sister agreed to babysit, and Mrs. Kassem decided it would look good to bring Reina along. Proof of her charitable employment practices. That's where Sheikh Tariq bin Khalifa Al Mansour first saw her. He was 47 then, recently separated from his first wife. Distinguished, well-spoken. He asked Reina about the Philippines, about her family, about what brought her to Dubai. He listened in a way that made her feel visible for the first time in 18 months. 2 days later, flowers arrived at Mrs. Kassem's villa. Within a week, Tariq had invited Reina to coffee. Chaperoned, respectful, proper. Within a month, he knew about Isabel, about medical bills, about Reina's mother struggling to afford her granddaughter's asthma medication. And then he made everything go away. 950,000 pesos in family debt, hospital bills, school fees, a loan her brother took that went bad. Tariq paid it all. Reina didn't ask him to. He simply showed her the bank transfer receipts one afternoon over tea and said, "Your family shouldn't suffer because you're here taking care of someone else's children." The proposal came 6 weeks later. Not romantic, practical. He was getting older, he said. His first marriage had been complicated. He wanted companionship, stability, and if she agreed, he would sponsor Isabel's visa. Mother and daughter could finally be together. Reina's closest friend in Dubai, a Filipina nurse named Carmina, told her the truth over chicken adobo in a cramped Karama apartment the night before Reina gave her answer. "Men like him don't marry women like us out of love. Carmina said, pushing rice around her plate. They marry us because we're grateful. Because we owe them. Because they think that makes us controllable. Reina knew Carmina was right. She'd heard the stories, wealthy Gulf men who married domestic workers, then treated them like property. But that night, her phone rang. Video call from the Philippines. Isabel appeared on the screen wearing a school uniform 2 sizes too small, the same one she'd worn for 2 years. She was coughing, that wet, rattling sound that meant another hospital visit. Another 87,000 pesos Reina's mother didn't have. Mama, when are you coming home? Isabel asked between coughs, her small face pixelated and impossibly far away. Reina looked at her daughter's face on that cracked phone screen. Then she looked at Carmina. If I say no, she stays sick. If I say yes, she gets to be with me. What choice is that? She said yes the next morning. The wedding happened fast. No celebration, no guests beyond Tariq's immediate family. Reina wore a simple dress from a mall in Dira. The ceremony lasted 11 minutes. Tariq's first wife, Amira, lived in Abu Dhabi. A modern arrangement, he explained when Reina asked. They'd separated amicably, he said. She preferred her independence. They remained cordial. But when Reina moved into Tariq's villa in Emirates Hills, something felt wrong. The household staff, 2 Filipina housekeepers, an Indian driver, an Indonesian cook, greeted her politely, respectfully. But when she mentioned Amira's name casually one morning, asking if the villa had always been decorated this way, or if Amira had chosen the furniture, the room went completely silent. The head housekeeper, a woman named Lourdes, who'd worked for Tariq for 9 years, looked at Reina with an expression that wasn't quite pity, but close to it. Then she excused herself and left the room without answering. Reina tried asking the driver. He suddenly remembered an errand. She tried asking the cook. She suddenly needed to check on dinner. Nobody would talk about Amira. And the more Reina asked, the quieter everyone became. 3 months into her marriage, Reina would learn why. But by then, it would be far too late to leave. If you've ever made one choice that changed everything, one decision you couldn't undo, you understand what Reina felt the moment she said yes. She wasn't naive. She was desperate. And sometimes, desperation looks like love when you're drowning. Stay with this story because what Reina doesn't know yet is that the villa she just moved into has buried a secret that will make her realize she's not the first woman Tariq trapped. Subscribe if you believe women like her deserve to know the truth before it's too late. October 2021. 3 months into marriage, people always ask the same question when they hear stories like this. If it was so bad, why didn't she just leave? The answer is simple. By the time Reina realized she was trapped, the door had already been locked from the outside. It started small. Little things that seemed like concern rather than control. 2 weeks after the wedding, Tariq asked for her phone password. Just in case of emergency, he said. What if something happens and I need to reach your family? It seemed reasonable. She gave it to him. A month later, he mentioned that her passport would be safer in his office safe. The villa has had break-ins before, he explained. Better to keep important documents secure. She handed it over. By October, 3 months into the marriage, Reina had started noticing the cameras. They were everywhere, angled at every entrance, every hallway, the kitchen, even the garden. When she asked Tariq about them, he said they were standard security for the neighborhood. But she'd catch him watching the feeds on his phone during dinner, his eyes tracking her movements even when she was just walking to get water. Then came the GPS tracker on her phone. She discovered it by accident when her battery started draining, faster than usual. A tech-savvy cousin in Manila walked her through checking her phone settings over WhatsApp. There it was. Location services running constantly in the background, feeding data to an app she'd never installed. When she confronted Tariq, he didn't apologize. He didn't even pretend to be caught. "You're my wife now," he said calmly, not looking up from his laptop. "I have a right to know where you are." And that's when Reina started asking about Isabel's visa. Every week, she'd bring it up. "Have you heard back from immigration? When can I bring my daughter here?" Every week, the answer was the same. "It's processing. These things take time." But Reina called the immigration office herself one afternoon, using the villa's landline. The officer checked the system and told her the truth. No application had been filed. No petition existed. Isabel's name wasn't in their database at all. That night, Reina realized the promise that made her say yes had been a lie from the beginning. She thought about leaving, packing a bag, calling Carmina, disappearing into the Filipina community in Dara, where Tariq's reach couldn't find her. But then Lourdes, the head housekeeper, sat her down in the kitchen one morning after Tariq left for work and explained how the system actually worked. Reina's legal status was tied entirely to Tariq. Her residence visa, her ability to work, her right to exist in the country, all of it depended on him. If he reported her as absconded, their word for a worker who leaves their sponsor without permission, she would become illegal instantly. The authorities would blacklist her, deport her. She'd lose everything. And worse, Tariq could press charges, demand repayment of the money he'd spent on her family, wages he'd claimed she owed, her mother, her brother, everyone back home. They'd be legally responsible for debts they could never pay. "You have no rights here that he doesn't give you," Lourdes said quietly, her hands folded on the marble kitchen counter. "I've seen it before. Women who try to leave. It never ends well." The villa felt colder after that conversation. The marble floors that had seemed so elegant when she first arrived now felt like ice under her feet. Tariq had started burning frankincense every evening. A traditional custom, he said. But the thick, sweet smoke made Reina nauseous. Everything about the house began to feel suffocating. One afternoon in late October, Reina was in the laundry room folding towels when Salma, one of the Egyptian housekeepers, spoke to her in a voice barely above a whisper. "There was one before you." Reina stopped folding. "What?" Salma glanced toward the hallway, making sure they were alone. "A Jordanian girl. Her name was Hala. She was here 2 years ago, maybe 3. She got pregnant. They fought. One night she left. She escaped?" Salma's expression didn't change. "Her family came looking 6 months later. They filed reports, hired someone to investigate. But nothing came of it. Where did she go?" Salma folded a pillowcase with shaking hands. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with something Reina recognized immediately. Fear. "The desert is very big," Salma said. Then she picked up the laundry basket and left the room. That night, Reina pulled out her phone. She typed carefully into the search bar. "Missing Jordanian woman, Dubai, 2020. 3 results appeared. She clicked the first link. The bedroom door opened. "What are you looking for?" Tariq stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. His voice was calm, too calm. Reina's fingers moved faster than her brain. She closed the browser, deleted the search history, and locked her phone in one fluid motion. "Nothing," she said, forcing her voice steady. "Just homesick. Looking at photos." Tariq stared at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the room, took the phone gently from her hands, and placed it on his nightstand. "Sleep," he said. "You're thinking too?" much. But Reina didn't sleep that night, because now she knew. She wasn't the first woman Tariq had trapped in this house, and if she wasn't careful, she wouldn't be the last. August 2022, 13 months into marriage. Before there was Tariq, there was Mateo Cruz. He was 34, a radiology technician at Prime Hospital. Mestizo, his grandfather had been Spanish, which gave Mateo light brown hair, hazel eyes, and fair skin that burned easily in the Gulf sun. He'd been in Dubai for 6 years, living in a cramped studio in International City, sending money home to Quezon City every month, just like Reina did. They'd met at St. Mary's Church in Oud Metha, back when Reina was still working as a nanny. Sunday Mass, then coffee at the cheap Filipino cafe across the street, where a cup of Barako cost 5 dirhams and tasted like home. They'd talked about small things: family, exhaustion, the particular loneliness of living in a country that needed your labor but didn't want you to stay. For 4 months, it had been quiet and safe. Nothing dramatic. Just two people who understood what it meant to be far from everything that mattered. Then Tariq appeared, and Reina made her choice. She blocked Mateo's number, stopped going to St. Mary's, and buried whatever had been growing between them under the weight of necessity. Mateo never called, never showed up. He respected her decision the way good men do, by disappearing completely. But on August 12th, 2022, Reina's world cracked open. Tariq had been gone for 3 weeks. Business in Abu Dhabi, he'd said, though Reina suspected otherwise. She'd been alone in the villa with the housekeepers and the cameras and the suffocating quiet when her mother called from Manila at 2 in the morning Dubai time. Isabel was in the hospital. Severe asthma attack. Her oxygen levels had dropped dangerously low. The doctors wanted to keep her for observation, but the bill was already 87,000 pesos and climbing. Reina's mother was crying on the phone, asking what to do, and Reina felt the walls of the villa closing in around her. She called Tariq immediately. He answered on the 4th ring. The background noise told her everything. Restaurant sounds, silverware clinking, women's laughter. "What is it?" His voice was clipped, annoyed. "Isabel's in the hospital. She can't breathe. They need 87,000 pesos, or they'll discharge her." Silence. Then, "Handle it. Isn't that what the money is for?" "Tariq, she's 7 years old. She needs some. I'm in a meeting. We'll discuss this when I'm back." He hung up. Reina stood in the middle of that massive, empty villa with her phone in her hand and realized something she should have understood the moment she said yes. Tariq had never cared about Isabel. The promise to bring her daughter to Dubai had been bait. Nothing more. She pulled up her blocked contacts, found Mateo's name, stared at it for 10 minutes before her thumb moved on its own. The text was simple. "Can we talk?" He responded in 40 seconds. "Where?" They met at a small restaurant in Karama, one of those places with plastic chairs and fluorescent lights where Filipino families gathered because the sisig was authentic and cheap. Mateo was already there when she arrived, sitting in the back corner. He looked thinner than she remembered, tired, older. When he saw her, he didn't smile, just said, "I knew you'd call eventually." She told him everything: the monitoring, the cameras, the locked passport, the lie about Isabel's visa, the woman named Hala who disappeared into the desert. She told him about the suffocating fear that woke her up every night, the way the villa felt like a tomb, the way Tariq looked at her now. Not like a husband, but like something he owned. Mateo listened without interrupting. When she finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. "I have a studio in International City," he said quietly. "It's small, it's not much, but if you need to breathe, if you need to remember what it feels like to be yourself, It's there. She went that night. Not to hide, not to run away. Just to remember what it felt like to be human. To sit in a room where no cameras watched her. To talk without whispering. To exist without fear. Mateo's studio smelled like cheap soap and instant coffee. The sound of traffic filtered through the single window. The space was barely bigger than the storage closet she'd lived in as a nanny. But it felt like freedom. They didn't plan what happened next. There were no speeches about love or future or consequences. Just two people who'd been alone for too long, clinging to each other in the dark because it was the only thing that made sense. His hands were careful, kind. Everything Tariq's had stopped being months ago. They slept together once. Just once. And then Reina went back to the villa before sunrise, slipped past the cameras she now knew how to avoid, and climbed into her empty bed. Tariq wouldn't return from Abu Dhabi for another 4 days, but everything had changed. 6 weeks later, in late September, she took a pregnancy test in the marble bathroom while Tariq was at his office. Positive. She did the math 3 times. The last time she'd been intimate with Tariq, early July. Conception date, mid-August. The baby wasn't his. The baby was Mateo's. Reina sat on the cold bathroom floor, her hand on her stomach, and understood with perfect clarity she had approximately 7.5 months before her husband discovered her betrayal. 7.5 months before the cage became a grave. If you're still here, you know what it's like to make one choice that changes everything. Reina didn't plan this. She just wanted to breathe for one night. She wanted to remember what it felt like to be treated like a person instead of property. Subscribe if you think she deserves to survive what comes next. Because the 72-hour countdown is about to begin. May 15th, 2023, 7:00 p.m. The contraction started during sunset prayer. Reina had been feeling off all day. That low, persistent ache in her back, the tightness across her belly that came and went like waves. But it wasn't until the call to Maghrib prayer echoed from the nearby mosque at 7:00 that the pain sharpened into something undeniable. She was 38 weeks pregnant, right on schedule, and absolutely terrified. Tariq was in his study when she knocked on the door, gripping the frame to stay upright as another contraction rolled through her. He looked up from his laptop, and for a moment, she saw something she hadn't seen in months. Genuine emotion. "It's time?" he asked. She nodded, unable to speak. He moved faster than she'd seen him move in their entire marriage. Grabbed his keys, his phone, helped her down the stairs with an arm around her waist. For a brief, horrible moment, Reina almost felt guilty. Because Tariq believed this baby was his miracle, his impossible son. And, in less than 5 hours, that belief would shatter. The drive to Prime Hospital took 23 minutes. Tariq made phone calls the entire way, his voice rising with excitement as he spoke in rapid Arabic. Reina caught enough words to understand. He was telling everyone, his mother, his brother, his business partners. The baby was coming. His son was finally arriving. By the time they reached the hospital at 7:34 p.m., the waiting room had already started filling. Tariq's mother, Sheikh Noura, flew in from Abu Dhabi with her assistant. His younger brother Rashid arrived with a professional photographer, because apparently this birth needed to be documented like a state event. Cousins appeared. Friends from the business community. The waiting room transformed into something between a celebration and a parade. The smell of Arabic coffee filled the air. Someone had brought dates. Congratulations were being exchanged in advance, as if the baby's arrival was already guaranteed to be perfect, healthy, and most importantly, undeniably, Tariq's. Reina was wheeled into the labor and delivery unit while the celebration continued outside. The nurse who admitted her was Filipina. Her name tag read Josie Tan, and she gave Reina's hand a quick, knowing squeeze before taking her vitals. "You're doing great," Josie whispered. "Just breathe through it." But Reina wasn't worried about the labor. She was worried about what came after. Dr. Patricia Lim arrived at 8:15 p.m. to check on her progress. She was 52, Malaysian Chinese, with 27 years of obstetric experience in the Gulf. She'd delivered over 8,000 babies across Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Sharjah. She'd seen everything: high-risk pregnancies, emergency C-sections, twins delivered in the back of ambulances. But she'd also seen something else. Women whose eyes held a specific kind of fear. The kind that had nothing to do with childbirth and everything to do with what waited for them outside the delivery room. "Let's check your medical history," Dr. Lim said calmly, pulling up Reina's file on the tablet. "Any complications during pregnancy?" "No," Reina said, her hands gripping the bed rails as another contraction built. Everything was normal. "And your husband? He's excited?" Reina's face changed. Just for a second, a flicker of something Dr. Lim had learned to recognize over decades of working in the Gulf. Terror masked as compliance. "Yes," Reina said flatly. "Very excited." Another contraction hit, harder this time, tearing through her abdomen like a wave crashing against rocks. Reina gasped, reaching out blindly, and her hand caught Dr. Lim's wrist with surprising strength. "The baby," Reina's voice broke. "He's not—" She couldn't finish. The pain stole her words, but her eyes said everything. Dr. Lim leaned in closer, keeping her voice low enough that the nurses at the station outside couldn't hear. "Not what?" Reina's grip tightened. "Not his." 2 words. That's all it took. Dr. Lim had heard this confession twice before in her career. Once in 2014, once in 2019. Both times the women had been right to be afraid. One had been deported within a week, her baby taken by the father's family. The other had disappeared entirely. Her family filed missing person reports that went nowhere. "Okay," Dr. Lim said quietly, professionally. "We're going to take care of you. Do you understand me? We're going to take care of you." The labor progressed faster than expected. By 10:30 p.m., Reina was fully dilated. By 11:15 p.m., she was pushing. The pain was overwhelming, primal, the kind that erases everything except the desperate need for it to end. Outside in the waiting room, Tariq paced with his phone pressed to his ear, giving updates in real time. His mother sat in a corner sipping tea, already discussing plans for the baby's akika ceremony. Rashid joked with the photographer about getting the perfect shot of the new father holding his son for the first time. No, one knew what was about to happen. At 11:47 p.m., Gabriel Mateo Valdez came into the world. He weighed 3.2 kilograms. He was healthy. His lungs worked perfectly. His APGAR scores were 9 at 1 minute, 10 at 5 minutes. And his skin was 3 shades lighter than his mother's. Dr. Lim caught him, cleared his airway, and felt her heart drop into her stomach. Light brown hair, still wet but unmistakably warm-toned. Hazel-tinged eyes that would probably settle into something closer to brown, but definitely not the dark eyes Tariq had. Features that belonged to someone else entirely. The delivery room went silent. Josie, the Filipino nurse assisting, saw it too. Her eyes went wide. She looked at Dr. Lim, then at Reina, then back at the baby. Reina didn't reach for her son. She just stared at him, tears streaming down her face, and whispered in Tagalog, "Patay na ako. I'm dead." Dr. Lim made a decision in less than 5 seconds. She wrapped the baby quickly in a thermal blanket, covering his head and most of his face. She turned to Josie and spoke in a voice loud enough for the room to hear, but calm enough not to cause alarm. Baby needs NICU assessment. Possible respiratory distress. Let's get him evaluated immediately. It was a lie. The baby's breathing was perfect. His color was good. His heart rate was strong. But the lie bought time. Josie understood immediately. She nodded, took the baby from Dr. Lim's arms, and moved quickly toward the door. I'll take him to NICU right now. Outside in the waiting room, Tariq stood up when he saw the nurse rushing past with a bundled infant. Is that him? Can I see? NICU assessment, sir, Josie said without stopping. Precautionary. The doctor will update you shortly. And then she was gone, disappearing down the corridor with Gabriel before Tariq could get a good look. Dr. Lim stayed with Raina through the afterbirth, through the standard checks, through the shaking and tears that came once the adrenaline faded. She kept her voice steady, professional. But when she leaned close to clean Raina's face with a damp cloth, she whispered 4 words. We have 72 hours. 72 hours to get Raina out of the UAE before Tariq saw his son's face. 72 hours before the truth became undeniable. 72 hours before Raina Valdez either escaped or disappeared like Hala before her. The clock had started. 2:17 a.m., May 16th. Tariq's patience ran out at exactly 2:17 in the morning. He'd been sitting in that waiting room for over 6 hours. His mother had dozed off in a corner chair. Rashid had taken 3 phone calls about business that couldn't wait. The photographer had left around midnight. The celebration atmosphere had slowly deflated into exhausted silence. But Tariq hadn't moved. He'd been pacing, checking his watch, asking every nurse who passed when he could see his son. Each time the answer was the same. Still under observation, sir. The doctor will update you soon. Finally, he'd had enough. He stood up, straightened his kandura, and walked toward the NICU with Rashid following close behind. When the nurse at the desk tried to stop him, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I'm seeing my son now, he said. You can escort me or you can move. The nurse, a young Indian woman who'd only been working at Prime Hospital for 8 months, looked terrified. She glanced at the security camera, then back at Tariq, then made a choice. The viewing window only. You can't enter the unit without clearance. Tariq nodded. Fine, show me. She led them down a sterile corridor lit by fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The NICU viewing window was at the end, a large glass panel that allowed families to see the babies in their incubators without entering the controlled environment. Gabriel was in the second bassinet from the left, unwrapped now, sleeping under a warming lamp, perfectly visible. Tariq walked up to the window, pressed his hands against the glass, leaned in close. 5 seconds. That's how long it took. His expression shifted in stages. Confusion first, like he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Then his eyes narrowed. His jaw tightened. And finally, the realization hit like cold water. That wasn't his child. He turned to Rashid and said something in Arabic, low and fast, the words sharp enough to make his brother's face go from curious to stone-hard in an instant. Rashid looked through the window, looked at his brother, said one word back. Akid? Are you sure? Tariq didn't answer. He just walked away from the window and headed straight for the recovery ward. 2:34 a.m. The confrontation. The door to Raina's room swung open hard enough to bang against the wall. 3 people entered. Tariq, Rashid, and Dr. Patricia Lim, who had refused to leave Raina's side since the birth. Raina was sitting up in bed, still wearing her hospital gown, her hair matted with sweat. She looked at Tariq's face and knew immediately. He'd seen Gabriel. He knew. Who was the father? His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes right before violence. Reyna didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat had closed completely. "Answer me." His voice rose now, echoing off the walls. "Who did you whore yourself to?" Dr. Lim stepped between them. "Mr. Al-Mansour, I'm going to ask you to lower your voice. This is a hospital recovery room, and your wife just gave birth 3 hours ago." Tariq didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Reyna. "Answer the question." Reyna's hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the bed rail to keep them still. "It was once," she whispered. "I was alone. You were gone for weeks. His name. Tariq, please. His name." She closed her eyes, said it. "Mateo. Mateo Cruz." The room went silent. Tariq's hand moved toward his pocket. Not fast, but deliberate. Dr. Lim saw it and hit the emergency call button mounted on the wall behind Reyna's bed. The alarm didn't sound throughout the hospital. It was a silent alert that went directly to hospital security. Within 40 seconds, the door opened again. Grace Mendoza stood in the doorway. 53 years old, Filipina, built like someone who'd spent 15 years breaking up fights in emergency rooms and parking lots. She wore the navy blue uniform of Prime Hospital Security and carried herself like someone who didn't take orders from anyone who wasn't signing her paycheck. "Everyone except medical staff leaves this room, now." Tariq turned to look at her. "Do you know who I am?" Grace didn't blink. "I know exactly who you are, and I know hospital policy. Medical staff and patient only. Everyone else exits, or I call Dubai police." Rashid put a hand on his brother's shoulder. "Tariq, not here. Not like this." But Tariq shook him off. He walked closer to Reyna's bed, not close enough for Grace to physically intervene, but close enough that Reyna pressed herself back against the pillows. "You've destroyed everything," he said quietly. "My name, my family, my reputation. I want you out of this hospital by morning, out of my house by noon. Do you understand me?" Reyna nodded, tears streaming down her face. "And if I ever see you or that bastard child again, I will make sure you regret it for whatever time you have left." Grace stepped forward. "That's enough. Out. Now." Tariq looked at Reyna one last time, then turned and walked out. Rashid followed. The door closed behind them. The moment they were gone, Reyna collapsed forward, sobbing into her hands. Dr. Lim sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We're getting you out. Do you hear me? We're getting you out." She pulled her phone from her coat pocket and dialed the Philippine consulate emergency line. A voice answered on the third ring. "Consulate General, Emergency Services. This is Dr. Patricia Lim at Prime Hospital. I have a Filipina national in immediate danger. I need a consular officer here as soon as possible." At 3 o'clock a.m., Angelita Santos arrived, 47 years old, consular officer with 12 years' experience handling distressed nationals in the UAE. She walked into that recovery room carrying a leather folder and a look that said she'd seen this before. "Ms. Valdez," she said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "My name is Angelita. We have 69 hours to get you out of this country. Let's start now." 11:47 a.m., May 16th. 12 hours after Gabriel was born, the machinery of escape began moving. Angelita Santos had spent the hours between 3 and 7 in the morning making calls that most consular officers never have to make. She contacted the Philippine Embassy in Abu Dhabi, woke up the duty officer, and initiated an emergency repatriation protocol that's only used when a Filipino national faces immediate physical danger. By 6:15 a.m., she'd arranged temporary travel documents for Reyna. The original passport was locked in Tariq's safe at the villa, but that didn't matter anymore. Emergency travel certificates could be issued within 24 hours if the situation warranted it. This situation absolutely warranted it. By 7:30 a.m., she'd secured a spot at a women's shelter in Dara, a converted apartment building run by an interfaith coalition that helped domestic workers and abuse survivors. They had 72 hours maximum. After that, the shelter's legal exposure became too high. And at 8 a.m., Dr. Lim did something that would cost her career, but might save Reina's life. She accessed hospital HR records, found Mateo Cruz's employee file, and called the emergency contact number listed for his family in the Philippines. His sister answered. "He's at work. Who is this?" "Tell him to come to Prime Hospital immediately. Room 304. Tell him it's about Reina." The line went dead. 10 minutes later, Dr. Lim's phone rang. Mateo's voice, tight with worry. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She had the baby, your baby, and she needs you here right now." Mateo arrived at 9:30 a.m., still wearing his hospital scrubs from the radiology department across the medical complex. He'd run the entire way. When he walked into room 304, he was out of breath, his hair disheveled, his face pale. Reina was sitting up in bed, holding Gabriel against her chest. The baby was wrapped in a hospital blanket with little blue footprints printed on it. She looked up when the door opened, and the expression on her face, relief mixed with shame, mixed with desperate hope, nearly broke him. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, just walked to the bed, looked down at the baby, and said 4 words. "I'm here. We're leaving." But leaving was already becoming complicated. At 9:47 a.m., Angelita's phone rang. It was a colleague at the consulate. Tariq had called that morning. He'd filed for immediate Islamic divorce, talaq, which under UAE law could be executed verbally and finalized within days. He'd also reported Reina's passport as stolen, which would flag her in every immigration database in the country. By 10:15 a.m., Tariq's lawyer had contacted the consulate directly with a formal letter threatening legal action. The letter outlined 3 claims: adultery, which is criminalized under UAE law, fraud, for concealing the child's paternity, and financial damages for the money Tariq had spent on Reina's family. The lawyer CC'd the Dubai Police Department. Angelita read the letter twice, then looked at Reina. "He's building a case. If he files criminal charges, they can detain you at the airport." And then, at 10:45 a.m., Reina's phone rang. Her mother, calling from Manila, hysterical. Tariq had called her, told her everything. Said he'd be pursuing legal repayment of the 950,000 pesos he'd paid to clear their debts. He'd threatened to file criminal complaints in the Philippines. He'd told her that Reina had destroyed their family honor and that she'd pay for it one way or another. Reina's mother was crying so hard she could barely speak. "What did you do? What did you do to us?" Reina hung up, turned off her phone, stared at the wall. Mateo excused himself and walked to the bathroom down the hall. He locked the door, turned on the faucet, and gripped the edge of the sink until his knuckles went white. He looked at himself in the mirror. 34 years old, decent job, stable life, clear future. And in the span of one phone call, all of it was evaporating. He'd just walked away from his shift without permission. He'd be fired by the end of the day. His savings account had maybe 11,000 dirhams, enough for plane tickets, but not enough to start over. His family in Quezon City depended on his remittances, his younger brother's college tuition, his mother's medications. And for what? For a woman who'd chosen someone else? For a baby that was biologically his, but would destroy both their lives? For a situation that had no good, ending. He closed his eyes, exhaled slowly. "I just lost everything," he whispered to his reflection. "My career, my savings, my future." But then, he thought about Raina's face when he'd walked into that hospital room. The way she'd looked at him, not with expectation, but with the kind of desperate hope that comes when you've run out of options and someone still shows up anyway. He thought about Gabriel. 3 hours old, fair skin and light hair and features that announced to the world exactly who his father was. "But she asked," Mateo said quietly, "and I never stopped loving her." He straightened his scrubs, washed his face, and walked back to room 304. Grace Mendoza was standing outside the door when he got there. She pulled him aside, her voice low and urgent. "Get her out of this hospital tonight. Tariq has connections throughout Dubai. Security, police, immigration. If she's still here tomorrow morning, I can't protect her." "Where do we go?" "The consulate arranged a shelter. In Deira. You leave after dark. I'll escort you out through the service entrance." At 8:30 p.m., under cover of darkness, Grace walked Raina, Mateo, and Gabriel out through the hospital's loading dock. A consulate driver was waiting with an unmarked sedan. They drove to a converted apartment building on a side street in Deira. No signs, no markings, just a blue door with an intercom. A Filipina woman named Tessie opened the door, looked at the baby, and said simply, "Come in. You're safe here." But they weren't safe. Not really. 51 hours remaining. 11:47 p.m., May 16th. Exactly 24 hours after his son was born, Sheikh Tariq bin Khalifa Al Mansour sat alone in his villa, drinking whiskey. This was unusual. Tariq rarely drank, maybe twice a year at most, and never alone. But tonight, the crystal glass in his hand was already his third pour, and the burn in his throat did nothing to erase what he'd seen through that NICU window. The villa was silent. The housekeepers had been dismissed. His mother had returned to Abu Dhabi. Rashid was the only one left, sitting across from him in the majlis, watching his older brother unravel in slow motion. "Let her go," Rashid said finally. "The scandal is already damaging us. The longer you pursue this, the worse it gets." Tariq's jaw tightened. He stared at the amber liquid in his glass. "She made me a joke. Every man in my circles will know. They'll whisper about it at business meetings, at the mosque. My own family will look at me with pity. So what? You file for divorce, you move on. You remarry someone appropriate. This ends." "No." Tariq stood up, the glass still in his hand. "She doesn't get to walk away. Not after what she did." Rashid exhaled slowly. "Tariq, think about this clearly. If you push too hard, if this becomes a legal case, it becomes public. Right now, only a few people know. You can control the narrative." But Tariq wasn't listening anymore. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he needed. Private security. The kind that doesn't ask questions. The man who answered spoke in clipped professional Arabic. "Yes, Sheikh Tariq. I need you to find someone. A Filipina woman, late 20s. She left Prime Hospital earlier tonight. Check the Philippine consulate, check women's shelters, check hospitals in case she's moved. I want her location by morning." "Understood. We'll begin immediately." Tariq hung up, looked at his brother. "If she thinks she can hide in this city, she's wrong. Dubai isn't that big." Rashid said nothing. He just stood and left the room, shaking his head. Midnight, May 16th into May 17th. The shelter in Dara was a 3-bedroom converted apartment on the 2nd floor of a building that had seen better decades. Peeling paint, narrow hallways, a small kitchen where the smell of adobo and garlic rice still lingered from dinner. Reina sat on a thin mattress in a shared room holding Gabriel, who wouldn't stop crying. 3 other women lived in the shelter temporarily, all domestic workers who'd fled abusive employers. One was Ethiopian, 8 months pregnant. Another was Indonesian, with a black eye that was still healing. The third was Filipina, in her 40s, who'd been there for 11 days waiting for her exit visa to clear. They were kind. They shared what little they had. Baby clothes donated by the church, formula because Reina's milk hadn't come in yet. This was common, Dr. Lim had explained. Trauma response. The body shuts down non-essential functions when it perceives danger. Breastfeeding was non-essential compared to survival. But Gabriel didn't care about the biology. He was hungry and confused and barely 12 hours old. His cries echoed through the apartment, sharp, persistent, dangerous. "He's too loud," Mateo whispered, standing near the window with his phone in his hand. "If someone reports the noise—" "I know," Reina said, rocking Gabriel back and forth. She was crying, too now, the exhaustion and fear finally catching up. "I'm trying." Mateo looked at her face, pale, drained, the kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix, and made a decision. "I'm going to the pharmacy. We need proper formula, bottles, maybe something to help him settle. I'll be back in 20 minutes. "Mateo, don't!" But he was already out the door. The nearest 24-hour pharmacy was 4 blocks away. Mateo walked quickly, keeping his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone on the street. Dara at midnight was still busy, late-night shops, delivery drivers, workers finishing shifts. He blended in easily enough. Inside the pharmacy he grabbed what they needed. 2 containers of infant formula, 4 bottles, a pacifier, diaper cream. The total came to 198 dirhams. He pulled out his credit card without thinking. The transaction went through in 3 seconds. What Mateo didn't know was that Tariq's security team had already contacted his bank, flagging any purchases made by no associates. The system was automatic. The location pinged immediately. Al Riga Road, Deira. By the time Mateo walked back to the shelter, the information was already being relayed to Tariq's villa. 1:30 a.m., May 17th. Grace Mendoza wasn't supposed to be working tonight. She'd finished her shift at Prime Hospital at 10 p.m. and gone home to her studio apartment in Bur Dubai. But she couldn't sleep. Something about the way Tariq had looked at Reina in that recovery room, the cold, controlled rage, had stayed with her. So at 1:15 a.m., she called a friend who worked in private security. Not the kind Tariq hired. The other kind. The ones who protected people instead of hunting them. "Can you check if anyone's looking for a Filipina woman who left Prime Hospital yesterday?" Her friend called back 12 minutes later. "Yeah, big search, high-profile client. They pinged a credit card transaction in Deira about an hour ago. They're mobilizing a team." Grace hung up and immediately texted Dr. Lim. "His team knows you're in Deira. Move. Now." Dr. Lim was asleep when the text came through. She woke up, read it twice, and called Angelita Santos. "We have to move them. Tonight." "Move them where?" Angelita's voice was groggy but alert. "The shelter was our only safe location. Everything else is too exposed." "I don't care where, just not Deira. They have maybe 2 hours before someone shows up at that building." At 1:47 a.m., Angelita called Tessie at the shelter. "Wake them up. They need to leave. I'll have a car there in 30 minutes. Tessie knocked on the bedroom door where Reina and Mateo had finally gotten Gabriel to sleep. "You have to go. Now." Reina looked up, still half asleep. "What? Why?" They found you. You need to leave. Mateo was already moving, shoving their few belongings into a plastic bag. Reina wrapped Gabriel in a blanket and held him close, her heart hammering. They left through the back stairwell at 2:20 a.m. A consulate car was waiting in the alley behind the building. The driver didn't introduce himself, just said, "Get in." As they pulled away, Reina looked back at the shelter, the blue door, the dim light in the second-floor window where 3 other women were still sleeping, still waiting for their own escapes. She wondered if she'd ever see safety again. The driver turned onto Sheikh Zayed Road, heading south. Mateo leaned forward. "Where are we going?" The driver glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "Honestly, I don't know yet. Consulate is working on it. For now, we drive." 46 hours remaining, and no backup plan. 11:47 a.m., May 17th. They spent the rest of the night driving in circles, literally. The consulate driver took them south on Sheikh Zayed Road, then east through Al Quoz, then north again through Jumeirah. 3 hours of movement with no destination. Finally, at 5:30 a.m., Angelita called with an answer. "St. Mary's Church in Udmetha. There's a priest there, Father Ramon. He'll hide you in the church basement until we can arrange the flight." Father Ramon de la Cruz was 62 years old and had been serving the Filipino community in Dubai for 19 years. He'd married couples, baptized babies, buried the dead, and occasionally, when the situation demanded it, provided sanctuary to people running from situations the law wouldn't protect them from. He met them at the side entrance of the church at 6:15 a.m., still wearing his pajamas under a zip-up jacket. He looked at Reina holding Gabriel, looked at Mateo's exhausted face, and didn't ask a single question. "Come," he said simply. "Downstairs." The church basement was used for Bible study classes and community gatherings. Metal folding chairs stacked in corners, a small kitchen area with a coffee maker and a mini fridge, 3 cots that Father Ramon pulled out from a storage closet and set up with clean sheets. "You stay as long as you need," he said. "No one comes down here without my permission." By 7 a.m., Gabriel was finally asleep in a makeshift bassinet, a plastic storage bin lined with blankets. Mateo collapsed onto one of the cots, fully clothed. And Reina sat on the floor with her back against the wall, too wired to sleep, staring at her phone. At 11:47 a.m., exactly 36 hours after Gabriel was born, an email arrived from Dr. Patricia Lim. The subject line, "You need to see this." Reina opened it with shaking hands. There was no message in the body of the email, just an attachment, a PDF file labeled Hala al-Rashid, case summary.pdf. She downloaded it and started reading. Hala al-Rashid, age 24, Jordanian national, domestic worker employed by Sheikh Tariq bin Khalifa al-Mansour from March 2019 to August 2020. Death certificate, dated August 14, 2020. Single vehicle accident. Emirates Road near Al Ain border. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Time of death, approximately 2:00 a.m. Police report filed by Tariq's personal lawyer, dated August 14, 2020. Ms. Al-Rashid had taken vehicle without permission. No. Witnesses. Case classified as accidental death. Investigation closed within 48 hours. Follow-up notes. Family hired private investigator in September 2020. Investigator received threatening phone calls. Dropped case October 2020. No further action taken. Reina read it twice, then a third time. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. Hala hadn't run away. She'd died, or been killed, and it had been ruled an accident so quickly that no one asked questions. "I would have been next," Reina whispered. Mateo woke up at the sound of her voice. What? She handed him the phone. He read it in silence, his face going pale. This is what he does, Raina said, her voice hollow. When women become problems, when we embarrass him, this is what happens. At 2:30 p.m., Angelita arrived at the church with news. She sat down across from Raina in the basement and spoke in the measured tone of someone delivering information that wouldn't be well received. I've been in contact with Tariq's lawyer. He's willing to negotiate. Negotiate what? If you agree to leave the UAE quietly, sign a non-disclosure agreement, never speak publicly about this situation, he'll drop the criminal complaint. You get on a plane, you go home, it ends. Raina stared at her. And if I don't? Then he proceeds with the adultery charges, the fraud case. We fight it, but there's no guarantee. You could be detained. You could spend months in legal limbo while your baby is in Manila and you're stuck here. It was the safe option, the smart option. Disappear in shame, take the deal, protect herself. But something in Raina's chest had hardened over the past 36 hours. Maybe it was reading about Hala. Maybe it was holding Gabriel and realizing he deserved a mother who didn't teach him that survival meant silence. No, she said. Angelita blinked. Raina, I need you to understand the risk. I understand. And my answer is no. Raina's voice was steady now. If he destroys me, everyone will know why. I won't sign anything that says I have to be quiet about what he did. I won't slink away like I'm the one who should be ashamed. Mateo, standing near the wall, said quietly, That's the bravest thing I've ever heard. Angelita looked at both of them, then nodded slowly. Okay, then we do this the hard way. At 3:45 p.m., Angelita's phone rang. She stepped away to take the call, and when she came back, her expression had changed. Immigration flagged your emergency travel document. When you go through passport control at the airport, there's a chance they'll detain you for secondary screening. I'm working to get it overridden, but it's not guaranteed. Raina felt her stomach drop. What does that mean? It means you might not make it through. Even if you have a boarding pass, even if everything is in order, they can still pull you aside and hold you until this gets sorted out. And if Tariq's people are watching the airport, they'll know exactly where you are. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioning unit. Mateo spoke first. When's the flight? Tomorrow morning, 6:30 a.m. departure. I booked you on Philippine Airlines direct to Manila. You need to be at the airport by 4:30 a.m. to clear security in time. Raina looked at Gabriel, asleep in his makeshift bed. Then at Mateo. Then at Angelita. We're going, she said. Whatever happens at immigration, we're going. They left St. Mary's Church at 3:00 a.m. on May 18th. Father Ramon blessed them at the door, pressing a rosary into Raina's hand. The drive to Dubai International Airport took 28 minutes in the early morning darkness. 19 hours remaining until the 72-hour deadline. No guarantee she'd make it through. If you've stayed this long, you're invested in what happens to her. Subscribe. Because stories like this, about women saving each other when systems fail, matter. And I won't stop telling them. May 18th, 2023, 4:30 a.m. Dubai International Airport at 4:30 in the morning is a strange kind of liminal space, half asleep, half awake, filled with travelers in transit between one version of their lives and another. Raina walked through the automatic doors of Terminal 1, carrying Gabriel in her arms, Mateo beside her with their single bag of belongings. The air conditioning hit them immediately, sharp and cold after the humid warmth outside. The smell of jet fuel mixed with coffee from the 24-hour cafes. Overhead announcements echoed in Arabic, then English, then what sounded like Urdu. Angelita had walked them as far as the entrance. "I'll be right behind you," she'd said. "If anything goes wrong, call me. I'm 5 minutes away." But she couldn't go through security with them. From here, they were on their own. Philippine Airlines flight PR 659 to Manila was scheduled to depart at 6:30 a.m. Check-in had opened an hour ago. They had 2 hours to clear immigration, security, and reach gate C-23. Should have been plenty of time. Mateo checked them in at the kiosk. 2 boarding passes printed out, his and Reina's. Gabriel, being an infant under 7 days old, didn't need a separate ticket. The system processed it without issue. They moved to the immigration queue. The lines were short this early, maybe 15 people ahead of them. Mostly Filipino domestic workers heading home after their contracts ended, carrying oversized boxes wrapped in tape and Reina's hands were shaking as they approached the booth. The immigration officer was young, maybe late 20s, with the bored expression of someone working the graveyard shift. "Passport and boarding pass," he said in English without looking up. Reina handed over her emergency travel document, the temporary papers the consulate had issued. The officer scanned it, and his computer screen blinked red. He looked at the screen, then at Reina, then back at the screen. "Wait here." 2 words. That's all it took for Reina's world to start, collapsing. The officer picked up his phone, spoke quickly in Arabic to someone, then looked at Reina again. "Please step to the side. Someone will assist you shortly." "What's wrong?" Mateo asked, his voice tight. "Sir, you can proceed through. The issue is with her document." "I'm not leaving her. Sir, you cannot remain in this area. Please proceed through immigration or step back to the check-in area." Mateo looked at Reina. She nodded slightly, trying to keep her face calm even though her heart was hammering. "Go. I'll be right behind you." But she didn't believe it, and neither did he. Mateo was directed to another booth, where his passport was scanned without issue. He passed through into the departure area, but he stayed close to the glass partition, watching Reina being led away by a female officer in a Navy uniform. They took her to a holding room off to the side. White walls, fluorescent lights too bright. 3 plastic chairs bolted to the floor. No windows. Just a door with a small glass panel that Reina couldn't see through from the inside. Gabriel started crying. That sharp newborn cry that sounds like pure distress, because that's exactly what it is. He was 3 days old. His world had been nothing but chaos and movement. And now he was in a cold room under harsh lights, with his mother's anxiety flooding through her body into his. Reina tried to calm him, rocking him gently, but her hands were shaking too badly. The crying got louder. The door opened. A different officer entered. Older, male, with graying hair and the kind of face that had seen every lie a traveler could tell. "Ms. Valdez," he said her name with the careful pronunciation of someone reading it off a screen. "Your travel document has been flagged by immigration authorities. I need to ask you some questions." "What kind of questions?" "Why are you leaving the UAE suddenly?" "My marriage ended. I'm going home." "Where is your husband?" Reina hesitated. "We're separated. Does he know you're leaving?" "Yes." The officer looked at Gabriel, still crying in her arms. "This is his child?" Reina's throat closed. She couldn't answer. If she said yes, it was a lie. If she said no, it raised questions she couldn't afford to answer. The officer waited. When she didn't respond, he picked up the phone on the wall and dialed a number. He spoke in Arabic, too fast for Reina to catch much, but she heard Tariq's name. She heard the word Zawja, which she knew meant wife. He was calling someone, Maybe immigration supervisors, maybe someone else. Maybe Tariq's people. 20 minutes passed. Gabriel cried for 10 of them, then exhausted himself into silence. Raina held him against her chest, feeling his tiny heartbeat, feeling his weight getting heavier in her arms as the minutes dragged on. Outside, Mateo was on the phone with Angelita, his voice rising. "They have her in a room. They won't tell me anything. Where are you?" "I'm stuck in traffic on Sheikh Zayed Road. Accident blocking 2 lanes. I'm trying." At 5:47 a.m., an announcement echoed through the terminal. "Final boarding call for Philippine Airlines Flight PR659 to Manila, departing from Gate C23. All passengers must board immediately." Mateo heard it. Raina heard it through the door. 43 minutes until takeoff, and she was still locked in a room. At 5:51 a.m., the door burst open. Angelita Santos walked in like she owned the building. She was out of breath, her professional composure cracked by the sprint from the parking garage, but her voice was steel. "I'm Angelita Santos, consular officer with the Philippine Embassy. This woman is a Filipino national under my protection. Under what authority is she being detained?" The older officer looked up, clearly not expecting this. "Her travel document has been flagged. I issued that document. It's valid. Unless you have a criminal warrant or a court order, you cannot detain her. We're waiting for confirmation from whom? Because if this is an immigration matter, I need to speak to your supervisor immediately. And if this is not an immigration matter, you're violating diplomatic protocols by holding her without cause." She pulled out her phone. "I have the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs on speed dial. Would you like me to call them, or would you like to release her now?" The officer stared at her, picked up his phone, spoke briefly, hung up. "Wait here." 4 more minutes passed. Then a supervisor arrived, reviewed the documents, made 1 more call, and finally, stamped Raina's emergency travel certificate. "You're clear to proceed." The time was 6:08 a.m., 22 minutes until departure. Gate C23 was a 12-minute walk from immigration. "Run," Angelita said. Raina ran. Full sprint through Dubai International Airport with a 3-day-old baby bouncing in her arms. Mateo beside her, the bag slamming against his back. Past the duty-free shops, past the prayer rooms, past travelers who turned to stare. Gate C23, the sign above it blinking. The door still open. The gate agent with his hand on the handle, about to close it. "Wait!" Raina's voice cracked as she screamed it. The agent looked up, saw a woman running with a newborn, desperation written across her face. He held the door. They scanned their boarding passes at 6:13 a.m., walked down the jet bridge, stepped onto the plane. The flight attendant closed the door behind them with a heavy metallic thunk. 60 seconds later, the plane pushed back from the gate. At 6:14 a.m., PR659 lifted off from Dubai International Airport, climbing through the dawn sky toward Manila. Raina sat in seat 32F, Gabriel asleep in her lap, and closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her face, not from sadness, not from relief, just from the sheer weight of everything that had happened in the past 72 hours. Mateo reached over and took her hand. Neither of them said anything. There was nothing left to say. 9 months later, February 2024, Quezon City, Manila. The kitchen table in their rented apartment was barely big enough for 2 people to eat at, let alone serve as a workspace. But Raina had bills spread across every available inch. Electricity, water, Isabel's school tuition, Gabriel's pediatrician visit, groceries. She held a calculator in one hand and a pen in the other, adding and subtracting, trying to make the numbers work. They didn't work. They never quite worked. The front door opened at 7:45 p.m. Mateo walked in wearing wrinkled scrubs, his hospital ID badge still clipped to his chest. He worked at Manila General now, earning roughly 1/3 of what he'd made in Dubai. His shift had started at 6 a.m. 13 hours on his feet. He looked at Reina's face, saw the bills, and didn't ask. Just kissed the top of her head and went to wash his hands. Isabel was doing homework at the small desk in the bedroom she shared with Gabriel. She was 9 now, taller, her hair longer than it had been when Reina last saw her in person 2 years ago. She'd cried for 3 days straight when Reina and Gabriel finally arrived in Manila. Not from sadness, from relief that her mother was real and alive and finally home. "Mama," Isabel called from the bedroom. "Can I ask you something?" Reina looked up from the bills. "Of course, anak." Isabel appeared in the doorway, holding her pencil. "Why did you really leave Dubai? Lola said you had a good life there, a big house. Why did you come back?" It was the question Reina had been expecting for months. She'd prepared different answers in her head, simple ones that a 9-year-old could understand without carrying the weight of the whole truth. But when she looked at Isabel's face, she realized her daughter deserved better than a simple answer. Reina glanced at Gabriel, who was on a blanket on the floor, 10 months old now, crawling around and laughing at nothing in particular. He had Mateo's light brown hair, his hazel eyes, and Reina's smile. He was healthy, happy, safe. "Because staying would have killed me," Reina said quietly. "And I needed to live. For you, for him, for myself." Isabel thought about that for a moment, then nodded like it made perfect sense. "Okay, Mama." She went back to her homework. Reina's phone buzzed on the table. A message from Dr. Patricia Lim, who she hadn't heard from in 2 months. "How are you?" Reina typed back. "Surviving. That's enough." She'd learned through Angelita that Dr. Lim had resigned from Prime Hospital before they could fire her. She'd moved to San Francisco, where she now worked with an immigrant rights organization helping women in situations like Reina's. She'd sacrificed a career she'd spent 27 years building. Reina also knew, through the Filipino community network that stretched across continents, that Tariq had remarried 4 months after her departure. A 20-year-old woman from Morocco. The pattern was continuing. And according to Salma, the Egyptian housekeeper who'd warned Reina about Hala, Tariq's daughters from his first marriage, refused to speak to him now. The whispers in his business community had damaged his reputation in ways a man like him couldn't control. But none of that mattered anymore. At 8:30 p.m., after Gabriel had been fed and put to bed, after Isabel finished her homework, after Mateo had eaten leftover adobo standing at the counter because he was too tired to sit, Reina stepped out onto their small balcony. It overlooked a narrow street where children were playing basketball under a flickering streetlight. The air smelled like grilled fish from a neighbor's dinner. Traffic noise echoed from the main road 2 blocks away. She picked up Gabriel from his crib and held him, watching Isabel join the kids below, laughing as she chased the ball. This wasn't the life Tariq had promised. No marble floors, no housekeepers, no luxury. But it was hers, and she was alive to live it. The moment that baby was born, Reina had 2 choices: die slowly in silence or survive loudly in truth. She chose survival, and sometimes, in a Dubai hospital at midnight, surrounded by strangers who become sisters, that's the only choice that saves you. Reina survived because women she'd never met chose to risk everything for her. Dr. Lim, Grace, Angelita, Father Ramon. Strangers who became lifelines when the systems designed to protect her failed. If this story moved you, if you believe trapped women deserve a way out, subscribe. Every story I tell is about the women the world forgets. Share this if you think someone needs to hear it. You might save a life.